Psychology of the Frontline, Mindset Shifts that Shaped Heroism and Resilience. Welcome to Fieldcraft Chronicles. In the waterlogged trenches of the Western Front, where the earth itself seemed to conspire against survival, young men discovered something more powerful than any weapon in their arsenal: the ability to transform their minds. This is the story of how psychological resilience became the ultimate survival tool, forged in conditions that would break the human spirit or reshape it entirely. The shift from civilian to survivor. The first night in the trenches stripped away every comfortable assumption about human existence. The constant percussion of artillery fire didn't just assault the ears. It rewired the nervous system, forcing soldiers to distinguish between the shriek of an incoming shell and the distant thunder of someone else's nightmare. Within days, men who had never slept anywhere but soft beds learned to find rest standing upright in muddy dugouts, their bodies wedged between sandbags and timber supports. This wasn't resignation, it was radical acceptance, the psychological pivot from resisting their reality to mastering it. They stopped asking why and started asking how. How to sleep in 3-minute intervals, how to eat bully beef that tasted of rust and despair as if it were a feast, how to find meaning in the smallest victory: a dry pair of socks, a letter from home, another sunrise witnessed. Building mental fortifications. The trenches taught soldiers that survival required more than physical shelter. It demanded psychological architecture. Veterans quickly learned to compartmentalize their existence, creating mental boundaries as deliberate as the traverses that zigzagged through their earthen corridors. They developed rituals that anchored sanity: the morning stand-to at dawn, the careful cleaning of rifles even when mud would reclaim them within hours, the sharing of cigarettes and stories during brief respites. These weren't mere habits. They were conscious constructions of normalcy in abnormal circumstances. When a shell landed too close and buried men alive in collapsing dugouts, those who survived often credited their mental preparation. They had already rehearsed suffocation in their minds, visualized the steps to freedom, transformed panic into procedure. This psychological fieldcraft proved as essential as knowing how to read terrain or preserve rations. The brotherhood of shared burden. Perhaps the most profound mindset shift occurred in how soldiers understood their connection to one another. The trench created a forced intimacy that dissolved civilian hierarchies and forged something more primal, a brotherhood born from mutual dependence. When Lance Corporal William heard Private Davies weeping in the darkness, he didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, he sat beside him in the mud and spoke of small things: the taste of his mother's bread, the sound of rain on a proper roof, the girl who waited in a village whose name he could barely pronounce. This wasn't weakness. It was, in fact, strategic emotional maintenance, the recognition that psychological resilience was a collective resource, not an individual reserve. Soldiers learned to read the subtle signs of a comrade approaching breaking point: the 1,000-yard stare, the trembling hands, the sudden recklessness, and intervened not with judgment, but with shared humanity. Legacy of the trenches. These men discovered what modern psychology would later codify: that resilience isn't the absence of fear, but the transformation of it into purpose; that heroism isn't fearlessness, but action despite terror; and that survival demands both gritty realism and stubborn hope. Their mental fieldcraft, learned in humanity's darkest classroom, offers timeless lessons for anyone facing their own front lines today. Subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this journey with those who understand that true preparedness begins in the mind.